I noticed too, like eating it, right? It kind of tastes like, as kids when we used to eat, right? It almost tastes like when you put too much mayonnaise on ham and, it's white bread. That's what it tastes like. And I also noticed too, like after the bees pollinate on it and you eat it, right? You almost get a strong blood flow to your canal, your phallus. You almost get a strong blood flow. Um, it definitely makes it rock. You know what I mean? Um, I like eating wild weeds, because I get to save on grocery money, right? Like literally, like my grocery bill last month and the month before that was like on average $140, and that was just buying fruit. So imagine if people just decided like my kids is going to eat, you know, um, wild dandelion. Like obviously for the kids, right? You want to boil it so like the acids can kind of simmer. Um, because like dandelion, right? It's very alkaline and it's very bitter. So like when you eat the dandelion, like I think I think this right here. I think that's a dandelion. I think that's a dandelion root. Um, you can go to the market and buy those in bundles. I don't see a lot being produced over here. I know in my yard it's like a bunch of them, but you know, I don't really like how the way they look when they're in, you know, the edges. I don't really like how they look, but I don't really care about, cutting my backyard as much. I don't really care about that because I know like it's not gonna grow high. But you know, I always look in it before I eat it to make sure it's no pests. You know, and it leaves a green pigment on your tongue. That's what I like. But like this is good for blood flow. It's good for um, microbe activity. If you want to kill bad bacteria, it's good for that. Um, but you'll notice though, like when you're vegan or you're fruitarian, mainly fruitarian, because veganism, that's kind of shadowed. Because like really, vegetarianism is veganism. You know, I don't think to the point where you start eating eggs, you're accountable. You know what I mean? Like that's not vegetarianism. If you eat eggs or you eat meat, anything that could hatch, anything that could move, um, like to me, that's cannibalism. And like a lot of Africans, they don't do the cannibalism thing. They like to show the wild safaris. Like right now, there's a thing going viral on like Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok with the I think they're called the Hasbi tribe. Um, I don't know where they're at. I don't know if it's Tanzania. I don't know where they're at. But I noticed like they always show this one particular hunter gatherer. I think I remember his name, but it's not coming to me. But he's just a small stature guy, and he like you see him when he's eating the spoils of war, right? The monkeys, the gazelle. They boil it and they stir it and they eat it. Like I don't know if I could live like that. Like I don't know if I could eat animals and but like you look at them, right? Their alkalinity levels are down. So I don't know who it is that's documenting them. They did bring like some fruit, but they brought them some wheat durum. You know, like you don't want tribes eating wheat durum. You know what I mean? Like that causes diabetes. But I did see them eating watermelon, you know, so that's good. But like eating monkeys, you know, like, nah, you know. Like eating an animal, period, that's savage, you know, like eating an animal, period. And like I've been guilty of doing that in the past, but like there's been periods and times where I've went years without eating meat. Like literally from like 2011, 2012 to like 2017, 2018, I didn't eat meat. I think 2017, 2018, I did eat a cheese pizza, you know, and that's how I blew up. But like, even in my blowing up and becoming obese, it comes from like having to take prescribed drug. It comes from having to take a mood enhancer. You know what I mean? Like my doctor, he told me, he's from India, right? He told me, he was like, he was telling me like how the dopamine levels work and how like, you know, but I didn't tell him like to the extent I was vegan. I think I did tell him I was vegan, but he didn't realize what that meant, right? Or he just didn't, it didn't hit him in his mind and say like, oh, he's vegan, okay. But he did give me, he may have, but he did give me like a mango fruit from India. You know what I mean? He brought a mango fruit from India and he gave it to me. And I ate it when I got home. But, you know, like when when you're vegan, right, and you notice that certain things missing in nature, you know what I mean? Like it's stuff that's supposed to come up from the ground. If we can come up from the ground, what is to say that a fruit can't come up from the ground? You know what I mean? Like God didn't say, oh, weeds come up, now fruit can't come up. This is how I know they're doing stuff to the air. This is how I know that. Like literally, fruit is supposed to come up from the ground. The Bible didn't say Adam and Eve planted a seed and an apple grew. It didn't say that. You know, it said, I think it said Adam ate the forbidden fruit, right? You know, so it's like that was the beginning of the story. It didn't say that. It didn't say Adam and, you know, Eve were farmers. You know what I mean? Like, and then when you look at mythology, right, and you kind of go back to like the British Isles and stuff like that, you know, the people, they had things, and then they had a black plague, you know, then that's when everybody started moving around, and you know, so, and that's when, you know, the Arabs, the black Arabs, you know, they start procreating with the enslaved populations and stuff like that, which had been happening. But obviously when you see this stuff, man, it's like fruits are supposed to grow wild, and they do in some areas. Like you go to northern Michigan, it's wild fruit in these places, you know. It's just that black people have been regretting to say that they haven't wanted to move to certain areas of the country, that they are privileged to do so. You know, like we haven't left the cities and went to some of these places we originally were at. You know, like you go to northern Michigan, like, you know, Calumet, Michigan, or Chippewa Valley, or, you know, like any of these places, really, you know, like the tip of northern Michigan, right? You're going to see things in some of these preserves where they have food that's in abundance. You know, like when people living on top of each other and you start to see chemtrails in the area and stuff like that, you start to notice that the only thing that's going to produce is weeds, you know. So like along my fence line, like you can see the the bitter fruits, they grow. Like even behind me, like the bitter tomatoes, they grow, you know. So they grow every season. It's not a large food production, but like if you can manage with weeds, you can do what you have to do. Like you can get through the day if you can just eat weeds. And it's countries that just eat weeds, you know. Like if you're in say for instance, like if you're in Syria or something like that, and you're not getting food production due to war, the people over there are eating weeds. You know, they're eating plants. You know what I mean? So you got to do what you got to do. Because I wouldn't be the one trying to be like, I'm American Indian, so I'm gonna write American Indian on an application and get a job. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that, you know. Because what's gonna happen is you're gonna get around people, they're gonna bring down your attitude, your energy, and you're gonna be like, dang, I shouldn't have signed up for this, you know. Great Peace, Yakoki. Your dandelion roots all along here.